I'm doing this because it is right, because it is fair, and because it is what I believe in. We risk becoming an island of strangers, not a nation that walks forward together.
Keir Starmer's declared crackdown on legal immigration is dominating UK headlines as rebels in his own party condemn the turn in Labour's rhetoric on migrants. While Starmer insisted the integrity of his policies and their alignment with his own political beliefs, others likened Starmer's words to the notoriously nationalistic Enoch Powell and accused him of steering the historically left-wing Labour Party in a hard right direction. Bel Ribeiro Addy is one Labour MP who tweeted in protest. She wrote on X that this was an insult to those who have made the UK our home, and she rejected the labelling of foreign residents here as strangers. But immigration has dominated the political agenda for years, so is this really a break from Labour's traditional base, or is it a bid to finally address their concerns? In Labour's 2024 general election manifesto, the party did in fact pledge to reduce net migration, blaming the Conservative government for a spike in legal workforce immigration, despite its leaders having campaigned for Brexit in a bid to take back control of UK borders. But Labour's criticism of immigration was not made on nationalistic grounds. It was presented as an objection to exploiting foreign labour, neglecting unemployed Brits, and damaging UK working conditions overall. Workers' rights are fundamental to Labour's founding ethos, and moments of Starmer's immigration speech did recall them.
Britain must compete for the best talent in the world, in science, in technology, in healthcare. You can't simply pull up a drawbridge, let nobody in, and think that's an economy that would work. That would hurt the pay packets of working people without question. But at the same time, we do have to ask why parts of our economy seem almost addicted to importing cheap labour, rather than investing in the skills of people who are here and want a good job in their community.
But something notable about Labour's campaign before they came to power in 2024, it was a refusal to follow rival parties in pinning immigration to the top of their agenda, parties that it ultimately beat. A Labour government's top 5 missions would be the economy, energy, policing, education, and the NHS, their manifesto promised. Immigration was conspicuously absent. The manifesto even numbered the first policies that Labour would introduce, but as these headlines on screen show, since they came to power, a number of their priority policies have been watered down or postponed. Meanwhile, immigration has come to the forefront. These are the 5 priorities listed in their manifesto. As you can see, immigration was absent. Now, Starmer's speech on Tuesday marks an end to his party's refusal to paint net immigration as one of the UK's leading problems. And many of the policies he led with and the rhetoric he used had nothing to do with the workforce or working conditions in the UK.
Every area of the immigration system, work, family and study, will be tightened up, will finally take back control of our borders and close the book on a squalid chapter for our politics, our economy and our country. We will finally honour what take back control meant and begin to choose who comes here.
So the question we want to ask now is whether these policies are, as Keir Starmer insisted, in keeping with traditional Labour values, focused in boosting workers' rights, both at home and abroad, or whether this is something different altogether, something that would mark a new direction for the Labour Party and its place in politics. And if so, why this turn? Here to answer this question is one from Labour's own ranks, MP Bel Ribeiro Addy. Bel, do I have you?
Yes.
Amazing news. Bel, does Starmer speak for the Labour Party with these proposals?
I think there are definitely a lot of concerns throughout the Labour Party. Obviously, when we're listening to certain elements of the media, it doesn't sound like yourself. Some of them, there seems to be quite a huge pushback in terms of immigration and people stressing that immigration is the problem. But it's my belief that what the issue is that politicians and the media continue to talk about immigration all the time and then turn around and say that this is people's biggest concern. And the reality of it is that it's not. When you talk to people, their biggest concerns at the moment are the cost of living crisis, and when we're talking about what happened during the recent set of elections, it was the winter fuel allowance, it was the proposed changes to disability, so many different things happening. And when people do talk about immigration, because I'm not saying that they do mention immigration, when they do, it always comes down to resources. People have been made to believe that the reason why some things might not be going right in this country is because immigrants are draining resources. But this couldn't be far from the truth. And I think part of the problem is really how we talk about immigration, how we speak about migrants, and the information that we put out there. So, for example, I don't like to talk about people who are claiming asylum as illegal migrants, or who've come via boat as legal migrants, because actually legally by international law everyone has the right to seek asylum, but for the purposes of explaining this, they'll say when they're talking about immigration that there's so many illegal migrants / people seeking asylum, and that really isn't the case. The large proportion of people that have come into this country actually are people who have come because they've been asked to fill a particular job role. There are a lot of people on different working visas in this country. And yes, indeed, immigration has soared, but that was the government's policy. This points-based immigration system was designed for more people to come into the country and fill those particular roles. So then to turn around and say now there's too many, just makes no sense. And I was listening to some polling yesterday that whilst there were some people who thought we needed to decrease immigration vastly, when you ask them, okay, should we decrease people working in care, they said no. Should we decrease doctors, they said no. Should we decrease this type of person or that type of person, they said no. So there's a recognition of need in all of these different sectors. There's just an absolute crisis of, I suppose, leadership in the way that we talk about it. And I think we need to be brave enough in actually putting the figures out there. It is far too easy to just say that immigrants are the problem.
I don't know, Belle, if you were able to hear our previous interview. It was with a woman called Duna Ahmad. She is from Syria, but she's been living in the UK for 7 years. Her leave to remain case was seemingly frozen after the fall of Assad, and she's had almost no communication about it. And now this news about the double length of waiting time to citizenship has hit her really, really hard. I mean, she made it very clear that what the government seems to think are just pieces of paper or administrative burdens are people's entire lives. I wonder if you have anything that you would say to people like Duna who are really upset on hearing this news.
Well, firstly, I am extremely concerned that we would go about this. We need to think it wasn't so long ago that immigration legislation retrospectively applied ruined people's lives. And we said we learned lessons. We said we learned lessons from the Windrush Scandal. And that's exactly the type of thing that's happening. When you retrospectively apply immigration legislation in that way, it could cause some problems for people who you actually never intended to. And, it doesn't make sense that somebody who has been here for a certain period of time and who came for that certain period of time expecting to build their lives here in that way are then told something else. And actually, far from using the word strangers, I would never use that. If we go down this route, we're essentially trying to create a system of guests, and having guests who come for a short period of time obviously means they're not going to integrate. I don't think there's a problem of integration now, but if we're now saying, oh, come here for a couple of years, then, we'll send you on your way, that's not really, it's not really advertising the whole idea of integration. And more importantly, we could be creating a situation when we're losing valued skills in our country. Again, when we talk about this particular system, this points-based system, it was designed for people to come into this country. And those seeking asylum are not illegal. They have a right to seek asylum. And as we heard from your previous guests, it's not their fault that they are in this situation. And quite frankly, compared to the rest of Europe, we are not seeing as many people seeking asylum. And if we are talking about countries right across Europe doing their part, we're certainly not taking our fair share of refugees.
Mm-hmm. Now, Bal, you are firmly and consistently anti-racist, and you've called out your own party in the past when you feel that they're playing into harmful and divisive tropes. Would you agree with those who see racism in the rhetoric chosen by Starmer, or is that going too far?
What I would say is that I'm very concerned about it. I think sometimes when politicians react in this way, it is to play up to the media. And again, just like putting down certain pieces of legislation, you don't intend for something to lead there. But, language has consequences. Our policy decisions have consequences, and we have to be careful that, we don't take things too far. We can only think of what happened with those riots last year, and again that didn't come out of nowhere. It was because a culture a very anti-migrant culture had been built up, and we have to remember that a lot of the time when people seem to think that there are many migrants in this country, they're talking about people like me. And now that's not to say that people who have come to this country, who weren't necessarily born here, don't belong here. But I remember listening to a clip of Nigel Farage just taking looking at the statistics in London, looking at statistics of different ethnicities in London, saying that we've got so many foreigners. And somebody had to carefully point out to him that actually, no, these are not foreigners. These are people by ethnicity. It says Black British, it says Black Asian. Yes, you're counting them by colours. You're not counting them by who has actually been here. First generation, second generation, third generation, people that, know no other home. So we need to be very careful about how we talk about things, because it can end up supporting that kind of rhetoric and leading to those kind of narratives, and actually emboldening people to behave in a certain way that we know is unacceptable in our society.
Can you give us a sense of how much discontent there actually is within the Labour Party over this? Is Starmer feeling the heat?
I think people are definitely extremely concerned about this, and I have no doubt that while some MPs have been more vocal about it publicly, there are definitely others who who've made other representations, because they understand that particularly this type of language will not necessarily go down well in their constituencies, and we need to take another look at things.
Now, Bal, you are currently pushing for the government to reform nationality laws that you say are pricing children out of citizenship. What's the problem here, and how has the government responded to you pointing it out?
Well, at the moment, we have a situation where being born in this country doesn't even automatically make you British, which is, something that I don't take well. And I think it was a piece of reactionary immigration legislation set about in the 1980s that put this in place. But since then, the fees have just soared. Now, whenever I talk about these these particular children, some people often think there must be some sort of trick. They must be, so-called illegal migrants, or their parents must be. But we're talking about people whose, again, parents may have come here, be on a 4-year visa, a 5-year visa, and then eventually go on to get indefinite leave to remain, or people who are EU nationals who had not yet registered or had got EU settled status when they had their children. Now, their children are not automatically British. They have the right to register, and this has to be very, very clear. Every single one of these children has the right to register on the basis of having a British birth certificate, for example, or actually having lived in this country since they were young. They have the right. The right is not questionable. The amount they have to pay is definitely questionable. £1,214 it currently is, the most expensive in Europe. Many times the actual administrative costs. We are literally profiteering off this, and what we have found is that even though there are now fee waivers put in place, and this was, because of a challenge that was made a few years back, people aren't even getting granted the fee waivers, and we don't know why.
Well, and finally, Belle, while we have you, you were also among 43 MPs, primarily Labour MPs, who have signed an open letter to the Foreign Secretary urging a review of UK arms exports to Israel. Do you think that there's a case of UK complicity in Israel's abuses in Gaza to worry about here?
Absolutely, and it should be very clear from the British public's response that we do not want this. We don't want to be complicit. It doesn't matter whether it's an entire weapon or a part. If we are in any way aiding in what's happening in Gaza, we are fundamentally in the wrong. And it's absolutely not in our name, and we should not be selling any arms to Israel.
Belle Ribeiro Addy, Labour MP, thank you so much for joining us on MEE Live.